Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today, I share the story of Mike Stura. Mike is a regular blue-collar guy. He's a truck driver, mechanic, also rides a Harley Davidson, not your typical vegan stereotype. And Mike owns and runs Skylands Animal Sanctuary and Rescue in New Jersey. Here's Mike's transformative story. First of all, welcome and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me.
When did you become vegan? What kind of started that? Was it your health? Was it what was going on?
I was a vegetarian for like 15 years before. So I'm your regular guy. Like I'm a truck driver. I don't know if you really know me. I'm a truck driver. I'm a blue collar guy. I'm a truck mechanic, a welder, a Harley Davidson guy. And, so I'm driving. I never really thought about, veganism or vegetarians or much. I always thought I liked animals. I love dogs and stuff. I'm driving around with one of my coworkers at the time, a guy named Tony, who was like one of the biggest humans to this day I've ever met in my life. He was like 6'5", 6'6", 450 pounds, something like that. He was huge. We called him the mastodon. He was so big. But he was like a really clean cut guy, believe it or not. He wore button down shirts all the time. He had, he never had any dirt under his fingernails. He looked more like a politician than a truck driver. He was a good guy. He was a nice guy. I never saw him as anything other than that. And so we had just stopped and we got lunch, which I'm sure was pizza, because it often was. And we get back in our trucks and we're talking on the CB to each other, as we often did. And he says he can't wait to go home that night because his wife, Carol, had been marinating a London broil for 2 days. And they were going to cook it on the grill outside. And for some reason, for the first time in my life, I remember this feeling of like revulsion. And I was like, how many animals had to die for this guy to be this big? Like I just pictured this big giant guy gnawing on this big hunk of meat, and it just turned me off totally.
Right.
And I never had another piece of red meat. Never.
Wow.
And it wasn't much longer, I don't know, a week or so, when I stopped eating chicken and fish and turkey. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I don't know, total. And I was a vegetarian, and I was a vegetarian for like 15 years. I never knew any activists. I wasn't any sort of an activist. I used to go to all kinds of things and go out to restaurants with people who were eating animals, and I didn't think twice about it. Other than that, I was the weirdo. I would go to bike rallies and stuff, and guys would be walking around gnawing on like a turkey leg, or there'd be a pig roast or something, which pig roasts always kind of grossed me out. It always seemed wrong to me. I remember always thinking, everybody's here having a good time except that poor bastard. I really remember thinking that, like, why is it got to be that way? But I didn't put much into it. I remember thinking I was the weirdo. I actually thought that I would die, or I would have become very sick or weak, or because I wasn't eating meat, but I didn't want to do it anyway. It didn't matter. It felt like it just felt like a justice thing. Like, it's wrong. Why would I want to do this? I wouldn't want anybody doing this to me or to my dog, or, but I felt like I was the weirdo. I remember that. So long time I went like that. And then one day I was up on my Harley out on a ride, and I saw a flyer in a restaurant where I'd stopped to get a veggie burger, and where I'd often stopped. And it had a picture of a sheep on the front, and it said, "Come meet this sheep." And I was like, I like animals. I got nothing better to do. Let's go see. So I went, and it turned out to be a farm animal sanctuary. And I went, and there was a lot of talking, and I pay attention, but I'm mostly paying attention to animals. And then there were some steer, and they were out in the field, and there was basically I heard the words that changed my life, and it was, you know, maybe 20 words really. Um, and to paraphrase, it was basically the idea that um, cows don't just produce milk, you know, for the heck of it. They produce it for a baby. I had never even thought about that. Never. Like I didn't think about it. So I'm guessing that if somebody would have asked me about cows giving milk, I would have said they're cows. They just give milk.
Right.
Knowing full well that nobody just spews milk for no reason. There's a baby involved. And then the idea that basically if we're drinking that milk, the baby it was destined for isn't. And that was it. Done. I remember thinking, I was so mad at myself right then. Like I was like, I'm a grown man. I thought I paid attention. How did I not realize this? How did I never think about this? And how could I have been paying people my whole life to do things that I would never have done for myself? And I was upset. I was changed right then. I walked out saying, I will never eat another piece of cheese. I'll never drink milk, and I will never eat an egg again. I'm done. And I just went home and started reading, because as much as I, knew all that stuff to be true, the second it was said to me, I still need to know what I'm talking about. So I just started reading and reading and reading and reading, and that was it. I was different. I was not only changed from a vegetarian to a vegan, but I also was changed from, someone who was kind of passively accepting what goes on for these poor animals to an activist at that same moment. Right. It totally changed me.
Wow. That's powerful. You stand in there and you realize this. What are you feeling?
I felt like I'm not the good guy that I thought I was. That's what it felt like. Like I thought I'm not the I have spent a fair amount of conflicts in my life, verbal and more than that, defending people that I thought were struggling to defend themselves. And here I was victimizing who knows how many, throughout my life. They just didn't come in human form, and I didn't like it. I didn't like who I felt like right then, boy, I tell you. And and I was upset that it took me that long to know. And I went through a full range of different emotions, all judgments on myself, nothing on anyone else at first. It was just me. I was like, how disappointed I was in myself, that I should have known better. And, why didn't I do this 20 years ago or even earlier? It was, so revelation. But I'll tell you something, people always are impressed with the idea that it happened like that, and two big like epiphanies, but I have to be honest, when it happens like that, it's easy. It's not like someone teaches you and you get on board intellectually, but emotionally you're not with it yet, or you realize that it takes you doing some different shopping and reading labels and things like this. And like for me, it was like a switch had flicked, and it was like, both times it was two different ones, but it was like boom, switch went, and this is no longer edible. It's not even food. It's someone. And then boom, this is no longer food. It's for someone else, and how we get it is not the right way to get anything. And it was just over. It wasn't like I really craved it anymore. I didn't struggle with it at all. It was done. That's lucky.
Yeah. Now, Skylands Animal Sanctuary and Rescue. How did that start?
I had volunteered at other places at sanctuaries for a while, and was fortunate enough to help out in most aspects of sanctuary life, from from doing educational tours to putting up fence posts, and fixing equipment and running equipment and rescuing animals and helping with animal care and all that. And it quickly I learned that my impulsive nature lent itself to rescue, and I have a knack for it, and so I bought my own trailer and truck to rescue animals with, and to help other sanctuaries and stuff like that. That was the goal of it, the idea behind it. And when you get involved and you have a strong personality like I do, um, you have your thoughts on the way things should go, and the way you would like them to go, or what you think is your best route for advocacy or things like that. So it's inevitable that I'm not a good follower. So I I I really believe now in the idea of, if you aren't totally on board with the way someone is doing something, that doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. It means they're doing it differently. Maybe you should do your own thing. And so, you know, I just kind of started to lay back a little bit, and I did different kinds of stuff. I wasn't doing educational tours. I was just moving animals and helping with stuff like that, and rescues and whatever. And it was good. And I was a truck driver and a truck mechanic, so I was doing that too. So that's like, you know, almost two full-time jobs. And so it was fine. And then I took a couple of the animals that I had rescued, three goats, and brought them to a piece of land we had where we kept our trucks, a couple acres, and I had fenced in some, and I put them there. And then I got a call from someone about a calf that was up in Connecticut, that was taken from its mother at under a half an hour old, and they brought him to this place that was a petting zoo, basically, where it was outside of a plant nursery, and they put him in this dog run, where, in the hopes that he would attract people so that they would buy pumpkins and things like that. And so these two women, a mother and daughter, both grown women, would go and visit him all the time, and they would talk to him through the chain link fence. And one day they went there, and the farmer who was running the place said to them, "You should say goodbye to him. He won't be here when you come next time." And they were like, "What are you talking about? Where's he going?" "He's going to auction." "For what?" Probably dog food, or some low grade beef product. He hasn't been raised like a veal calf, so he can't be veal, so something like that. And they were like astounded that the guy just bluntly said that to them. He didn't think anything of it. He knows how it goes, and so he just thought they knew how it went, and they were beside themselves. And they are two strong women, so they, I'm sure, gave the man an earful. And basically, the guy said to them, "I paid $50 for him. If you want him, you can have him." And they wanted him, but they had nowhere to bring him. And they called around, and nobody could take him right then. It was the end of October, and I said, then I got a call, and I said, "Sure, I'll take him." Knowing he's a little guy, worst comes to worst, he lives with my goats until I find him a place. But I had really good luck placing animals before, and rescuing them and finding good homes for them. So sure, I'll take him. And so I went to get him, and I went up there, and he was inside this chain link dog run, inside a little plastic or calf hutch, little igloo looking thing kind of, and he didn't get up. And I crawled in with him, and he still didn't get up. And even though calves usually do like me, when you crowd them like that, they're usually like, I gotta go, they gotta get up and get out. And he didn't. So I lifted him up, and he stood for me, and I crawled out, and he walked out after me, and I was petting him and talking to him, introducing myself to him, and I saw his front carpus, basically what looks like his knee. And he's a Holstein, so his mom was a dairy cow. So Holstein boys are huge, huge, and they have these big, huge bone structure. But his front knees were bigger than normal, and so I touched him, and they were hot, and that is bad news, and that means he had an infection. And so I knew that, and I brought him home, and I carried him down the basement of my little house, and he and I slept in the basement the first night. And the next morning, I drove him 4 hours up to Cornell, large animal hospital in Ithaca, and they said, Mike, this is not good. He has septic arthritis, and you should probably let him go. And I was astounded. And first I'm like, I thought you guys were good doctors. How can he have arthritis? He's 3 weeks old. And they're like, no, he got an infection because he didn't get any colostrum from his mom when he was a baby. He got an infection in his umbilicus, and it traveled through him, and it is in his joints, and it's basically eating his bones away. And it was a nightmare. And they wanted me to put him down, and they were blunt with me, and they know me up there, and because of all the animals that I've transported and brought there for other places, and they were like, Mike, he probably isn't going to live. If he does, you can't afford it. He'll be way too expensive, and you don't have the backing of a sanctuary and all this. And in the end, I'm thick-headed, so I said no, and he ended up being in the hospital for months.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, well, first, I'll tell you something. It was a good lesson for me, because here I am, Mr. kind of rescuer, rescuing animals, and Mr. Empathy, giving tours and changes the whole life, to help the animals. And after a while, it becomes routine. If you do enough of them, enough rescues and transports and stuff, it'll be like, yeah, I have a goat. He's a boy. Can you give him a home? I have a female, a young heifer cow. Can you give her a home, and this and that, because they were all healthy and they were all doing well. You kind of see them as, I didn't realize I was doing that. And then all of a sudden this little calf comes along, Jimmy, and he was not perfect. And it was really good, bad for him, but good to remind me that they're not machines. They're not all perfect. You're not just going to get a calf and find a calf a home. It's Jimmy. It's not just a calf. And Jimmy has leg issues, and he has joint issues and infection and this and that. And so it was a really good lesson. It stopped me in my tracks and reminded me why I was doing what I was doing, and that is for the individual. And so he ended up being in the hospital for a couple months and costing me, a lot of money. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I would drive up there and hang with him for a couple hours. I'd drive 4 hours.
4 hours. 4 hours each way.
Yep. And I would hang with him a couple days a week. And then he would put his head on my lap, and I would read him books, and I would play him music on my iPad, and we would fall asleep together. And then I would drive home depressed every day, until one day I got a call saying, we had that culture of his infection. We've come up with this cocktail of antibiotics that seems to have killed it, and we're giving it to him right now. And so Jimmy is the reason for Skylands Animal Sanctuary. I took Jimmy home, and I got him a little house, and he lived with the goats, but while he was small, but the land where I was would never be big enough for more than one cow, and I wouldn't want to have just one steer. And it was too rocky and hilly for once he got big, for a boy who would always have joint problems. Right. So he needed a bigger home. He needed a big piece of land that was firm and flat, and he could have friends of his own kind, and so Jimmy is the motivation behind the whole place. If it wasn't for meeting Jimmy, none of the animals that are here would be alive, I don't think.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, he was the best.
So he did he pass on or?
He did. I lost him in August uh, of 2018. Um, yeah, yeah. But he was good. He had a great life. He never seemed to be suffering. Never seemed to have a bad day, ever. He was young. He was under 5 years old when I lost him.
Hmm.
But he had good days every day, and he was the boss, and he was the best. Like I said, he's the motivation. He yeah, what one day he just couldn't get up, and I thought it was related to the arthritis he'd had when he was gotten when he was a baby, but it wasn't. I guess he had a big growth spurt, and he was suddenly over. He was 2,000 pounds, and he somehow, I don't know if he had slipped during the night or what, but or he did it trying to get up. He dislocated his hip, and and uh, and I brought him to the hospital, and we they put it back in for me, and it just wouldn't stay anymore. And we did everything you could do for someone that big. Usually, you know, most places they won't even try if the animal's over 800 pounds.
Right.
And they put it back in, and he was 2,000 pounds for me because they knew that I would struggle without him. And we tried everything. We tried the flotation tank. We tried everything, and then he just gave me a look that told me he'd had enough, and I had to let him go.
Wow.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, that was one of the roughest things that's ever happened to me. And it probably sounds crazy coming from a 53-year-old man, but it's true story. He had such an impact on my life. He changed everything about me and my life. And I was really struggling for a little bit, but in the end, I keep falling back on the idea of how many others, Jimmy has saved because of him, because of him being who he was, and what an advocate he was for animals, and especially steer of his kind. He was such a character, and he changed so many people, and he changed me. And it was, I mean, he did, I always tell people, and he did more by far in his few years for anyone of his species than I'll ever do for anyone like mine. Of my species, I'll never be able to help the amount of people that Jimmy, as Jimmy helped steer and cows. There's just if I live to be 100, I don't think I could come close to doing what Jimmy did. He really changed a lot of people.
Do you have like a favorite Jimmy story or like something he did or?
Jimmy, I have so many. I mean, he was, he had these joint problems. So, when he was young, and you would think he would be delicate, But anytime there was anything that looked like trouble, he was the first one to get right in it. One time I was stacking I had some firewood, big cut wood, big pile of it. And, I turned my back for 2 seconds. He's up on it. He climbs up on the, on the thing. And one time there was a volunteer here, opened one of our barn doors, overhead doors, and it's about, I'd say, a 2.5 foot step up into that barn. That's where we store hay. And next thing I hear yelling, and I go running over. Jimmy jumped in the second floor of the barn with like 500 bales of hay and was having a great old time. So I had to put someone in there with him to make sure he didn't go down this hallway and cause trouble, while I closed him in the barn. And then I had to go get my trailer, hook it to the truck, and back up to the barn doors, put the ramp down because I wasn't going to let him jump down 2.5 feet and hurt himself. And I walk over, grab him, put a halter on him. I walk him into the trailer, and I pull up 5 feet and let him out. And he just walks out like, doesn't everybody get that kind of treatment? He's just a character. We used to do on the tours. People would come and meet Jimmy, and he would get an itch and they try and scratch it with their tongue, whatever. And I go over and I go to scratch him, and he would give me this look all the time. Like, I knew you would help. And I scratch him, and then he would just relax. He was just the best. He would still fall asleep. But, I always told people my favorite thing in the world still at the end there was when I would sit on the ground, and he would do it right on tours. And I would just put my arms out, and Jimmy would put his big head right in my arms. And you could feel, as he would start to fall asleep, you could feel the weight come on you of that big, huge head. And then he would just be out, He had a favorite song. If he would play any time his whole life after, because when he was young, when I first brought him home, we had to have him separate from everyone, even the little goats. So he was only allowed to exercise like a few minutes here and there because his cartilage was thickening as he got older, and we needed it to thicken before he did any more damage to him. So they told me how I had to keep him in a small stall, and I did everything. So I would play him music all the time. And to the day he died, Jimmy, if I would play, there's a song that my mother used to play, try and play on this little organ we had when I was a kid. It was Beautiful Dreamer. And so I would play him an opera version of that, Marilyn Horne, Beautiful Dreamer. And to the last day of his life, I played it for him on his last day. He would, anywhere he was, if that song would come on, I would play it for him. You would see him swing his head right around, right away, and he would just stop whatever he was doing and listen to the song. Yeah. He was a character. He really was. Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Never failed to make me smile. Never.
So he would fall asleep right in your arms?
Oh yeah, he would put his big head on me and just fall asleep with his head right in my arms, which is heavier than you think.
like you're just standing there, you just walk up to him, and
I would sit on the ground. I would sit on the ground, and he would lay down, and I would sit on the ground, and he would put his head right on me, and I would be telling people about Jimmy's story. Actually, I told his story before that point usually, and I would tell them about animals just like Jimmy and what happens to them when they don't get to live in a place like this. And Jimmy would just fall asleep. He would just put his head on me sometimes and just fall asleep, or he would be laying down, and then he would get up, and everybody would be astounded at how big he was. And he wasn't even huge for a Holstein steer. He was big, but he wasn't huge. But he was the most gentle thing in the world. And people could just come right out. He just loved people. He just loved everyone. He would turn it on every time for people. He would just turn up the charm to 11. Yeah.
That's great stuff.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
What's going on now with the sanctuary? I mean, obviously, you keep going. It's difficult, but there are obviously other animals there that you care for.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, if I didn't have the responsibility of the sanctuary and the other animals, when I lost Jimmy, I would probably have gotten on one of my motorcycles and just gone to Montana. That would probably be it. I really, well, the wind was really taken out of me. But I have all these animals that rely on me, and I love them all. It's not that it's just that Jimmy started it, and he was, he really was the cause for such profound change in my life. But I forced myself to rescue a another little steer the day after I lost Jimmy, because it was either that or be done. It was one or the other. Either I was going to get right back up and start keep doing the mission that Jimmy helped me get on, or I was going to move on. I was going to be done with it. It had to be like, it couldn't be that I was just going to be kind of in limbo. I knew either I was going to have to be who I was before, or I was going to have to be somebody totally different. It wasn't going to be that I could be, just kind of going along. So, thanks to Jimmy, again, a lot of animals were saved, because many things just fell into place after that. It was just, it was rescue after rescue for a while there. So he saved a lot of animals again,
How many animals do you have now?
Oh, about 250.
Wow, 250.
Yeah, which a lot of places have more animals than us, but we have a lot of big animals. We don't have nearly as many birds as most places, but we do have 74 cows, or bovine anyway. Wow. Cows, goats, cows, and steer, and so I don't know. I just love them. I don't know why I love them. The cows, I can't even explain it. I love them all, but the cows, I guess, are special. When it comes to my personal interaction with them,
right?
For some reason, they really drive me. Maybe it's because when I was young, I grew up in an Italian family, and I think back about this. And when I was young, on my birthday, my mother would make me veal parmesan, and I think once I realized what that was, I've never gotten over it. Never gotten over the idea that I was part of that.
Right.
Yeah. It's also the idea that when they're young, they're so innocent, and they're huge, already when they're babies. Some of them are so big. I have Joey. He was 102 pounds at a day old. He's so big, but he's a baby. He couldn't even stand. And so they're so innocent, and if you're their dad, like I kind of am, then they rely on you, for food, for everything. And then, not long down the road, we have some of them that are 2,500 pounds and bigger. We have some that are 6'4" at the shoulder.
Wow.
And they don't have to tolerate me at all. There's
right.
They could throw you right over the fence like a rag doll. And they don't. They're, I don't know. There's just something about that, taking them, and they become so powerful, and they don't, I don't know. They don't usually use it against you, and I just love them. I don't know. There's just something about them, but I think it's just, I don't know. When you think about the idea of who they are and how they could easily fight back, and they very rarely fight back. They just go along with everything. I don't know. To me, I think that to me makes them such sympathetic characters. They're such powerful animals, and they allow themselves to be led from here to there. Whatever that is, from birth to being impregnated to slaughter, to whatever, and they kind of don't have to. They could fight back, but I don't know. It seems more sinister that we treat them that way,
Right. Right. So innocent.
Yeah. We exploit that. In fact, we breed it into them, especially the dairy ones. We breed into them some level of passivity because they have to be handled so often,
Right. What do you think that they teach you?
It depends on who they are, which one it is. Like I said, Jimmy taught me to focus, to pay attention to the individuals. Don't forget that they're individuals, and some of them remind me of that every day. We have a boy here, Calvin, He's a 3-year-old Jersey. That's his breed, Jersey steer, and he's a wild man. He's a wild man. He smashes my machinery. He loves to wrestle, and he's not mean. He really isn't mean, but he might accidentally kill you. And I love that no matter what, like his name is Calvin, and no matter what, he's always Calvin. He's always him. You can always expect him to be him. I always say he's the real deal. He doesn't know how to pretend to be anyone else. So he doesn't give you what you want from him. He gives you who he is. And I just love it. He's just himself all the time. And it's really cool. I just love that about him. We have so many different personalities here that it's unbelievable. We have a boss girl, cow. Her name is Pammy, and I say she's the fastest cow in the world. I try sometimes she'll try and race me with my Kubota. We have a little Kubota side by side machine, and it only goes 25 miles an hour, but she keeps right up with it. She can run 25 miles an hour, and I don't think people can imagine a cow running 25 miles an hour,
Wow.
but she does. And she's not nearly the biggest. She's in a herd of 21 animals, but she's the boss. She's the boss. Her personality is huge, and she was starving and emaciated when I got her from a neglect case, and she is not going to allow that to happen to her again. She makes sure she gets what she needs. I love it. They're all different. They're all different. Right down to my boy Bucky, who's the most passive and he's probably the Omega in the group, and he walks around like Eeyore all day, like he's sad, but he's not. He's a sweetheart, and he's just low man on the totem pole, which sometimes is a good place to be because you don't have the stress that Pammy has, or that our big kids across the street have. They teach us a lot. They teach you how to be themselves. That's the one nice thing about a sanctuary setting, is that the animals are allowed to be who they are. They're not afraid really of predators. They're not afraid of us, the humans. They're not, most of them anyway. And they eventually get to be who they are, and they are unapologetically themselves, and it's the best part. That's why I think the lesson is that other than don't eat them and don't take their stuff, that comes from them. Be yourself is nice, and if you watch them, they know how to do it.
How does a rescue happen? I mean, you get a phone call, and is it just someone just happens to know that you're in the rescue business, the animal sanctuary, and they call you, or is it, and can it be from anywhere?
It all depends. I mean, we run the gamut, right? So sometimes it's neglect cases. Sometimes it's abuse. Sometimes it's an animal breaks free and brings my attention to them that way. It's a million things. Sometimes it's someone, I have 2 cows here from a 91-year-old woman who lived on the same farm for 70 years, and her husband passed away, and she was going to lose her farm. And so she had 2 cows that she'd had as kind of, quote unquote pets. And she didn't want them to go. And, and I wasn't really in the market for 2 full-grown girls right then. But I mean, how are you gonna not give a woman who is losing her, lost her husband and is losing her farm after 70 years a little bit of peace of mind that her 2 animals are safe? So that's how we ended up taking them. And I mean, they come from everywhere. And yeah, I think the idea by now is that most people who are involved in animal rights, at least up here in the Northeast, know who I am when it comes to cows and stuff. And so they call me, and I barely sleep as it is, and my phone is never more than a foot away from me. So if you call me at 2 a.m, I answer the phone, and everyone knows that,
Wow.
I don't mess around. It really feeds into my impulsive nature, the rescue. It really does. It really, They go hand in hand. I don't. I think really well on my feet. I'm really good at that, and so I don't. I don't have to think about stuff. I just go, and then the situation is what it is, and then I deal with it when I get there. That's how it works. And then other times, like I went down to Texas for Hurricane Harvey. Right when Hurricane Harvey was leaving, I just felt this urge, and this might sound crazy to you, but I've always had this. I always called it a spark, right? And I don't have any other mm, real explanation for what it feels like to me. It feels like a spark. It's just the beginning of an idea, just the very tip of it, and when it happens, um, it it will swell in me. Like it will just swell in me until it's something that I can't ignore. And I used to try harder to ignore it. But when it's an idea about an animal, or like in Hurricane Harvey, it was just the idea that I could be useful. And so I remember like saying, I think I have to go. And then 15 minutes later, I'm almost ready to go. The truck is attached to the trailer, and I'm ready to leave, and I am filling a cooler with tofurkey, and that's the way it works. And it's just, and so they're like, you know, my friends and are like, "What are you going to do down there?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I really don't. But I could basically run any piece of machinery. I could fix anything. I have a big trailer and a big truck, and I have you know, I'm pretty good at handling big animals, and so maybe I can be useful." And that was all. That's all how it started, And then you go, and in the end, I ended up bringing home a bull, a 2.5-year-old Angus bull, a rancher gave me, um, that had been swimming in the floodwaters for 2 days, and it was like a miracle. I mean, it was unbelievable. So it's this. That's how rescues come more than anything. If I don't have the feeling that I can help, then I don't go. Um, it's not that I just chase every story, or I chase every storm, or I don't do that. If I don't have the feeling, like if I don't feel that something is going to happen, I don't go. And if I do feel it, I go, even if it's far, even if it's a big deal, even if it's, you know, doesn't seem plausible that I could be useful at all, I go anyway. And it usually bears fruit.
Now, have like so many animals, and as you said, you barely sleep. How do you keep it going? Like, you going down to Texas, obviously gas money, all of that stuff. How do you keep that going?
We have to beg for donations, and I'm not great at it. I have to be honest. I don't like asking people for things. I'm not real good at it. And if you follow our Facebook page, and maybe other places' Facebook page, you'll see that I ask for help less than I should, probably. And I feel awkward putting people on the spot, but luckily there are enough people out there who recognize what we're doing as a positive thing, and they would like to see it keep going, so they donate, out of the kindness of their heart. It's amazing to me. I have to tell you, that's some of the most touching things, are to get a check in the mail from someone with a note attached to, saying how, one of our stories, or a visit here, or something, did something to them, and it touches me. I like it when people give something of their own that they worked for, and without even being asked. It's amazing to me. It really is. Every time I start getting down on people, because people can wear you down sometimes, um, I'll get a it could be a $10 donation in the mail, and it will change my whole day.
Mm.
I sometimes think about Hurricane Harvey when I was down there. Like, really, honestly, when I have a really dark day for some reason, I think about the idea of when I was down, especially when it's people who are getting me down. I think about being down in Texas, and I was there, and it was all volunteers. I was a volunteer there, and all these people were there rescuing cats and dogs, and there were people um, helping with horses and stuff like that. And I looked around, and after the storm was gone, and 2 days later, 3 days later, all these supplies were just coming in, like dog food and hay and straw for bedding and fresh water and all this stuff from people that like from all over the country who were just volunteers, and they bought all this stuff with their own money, and they traveled down to try and help. And it was pretty inspiring, I have to say, for a guy who gets down on people, because I see the results of our mistreatment of innocent beings all the time. And for a guy like that to feel uplifted by these strangers, it was something. Like I was impressed by the good nature of people, and how they wanted to help. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, what would your advice be to someone who's thinking about an animal sanctuary, like starting one up?
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. It will change everything. It will totally take up your life. You really have to know why you're doing it. You can't do these things for ego. You can't do it because you think it's cool. It's not feeding apples to goats every day and stuff. It's work, and it is all consuming. If you want to do it anywhere near well, it's all consuming, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of money, and a lot of people who honestly believe they will be on board and pitch in and stuff will fall off, because it never stops. It never stops. It doesn't matter if it's 0 degrees or 100 degrees, if it's raining or snowing, if you're sick, it never stops. You always have to take care of the animals. You always need to feed them. You always need to clean up after them. You always need more money. It always takes more time than there is in the day. We're doing this interview. I'm on the phone right now. I'm wearing a headset, and I'm driving because I had to go do some stuff. Like, that's the way it works. It never stops. So I'm not saying honestly, don't do it. I'm saying give some consideration to what it takes. Volunteer somewhere, intern somewhere. Farm Sanctuary in New York does a they call it the care conference. It's like a class where you go, and they try and teach you more hands-on animal care than you can learn in the amount of time. But it's a good thing for you to go if you're really thinking about it, and just get an idea, because I think that people think farm animals are no maintenance, but that's not true. You have to remember that many of these animals are modified over the years, so they are genetically modified, or through breeding and all this to be certain things, and none of them are bred for longevity. So they have a lot of issues that maybe their wild cousins didn't have, and so people get into it, and they don't realize how much goats. They think, oh, goats will eat anything. Well, goats need a lot more maintenance and care than people think, and you can spend a huge amount of money on vet bills and the heartache. That's something that people are not ever prepared for. Is the more animal friends you have, the more animal friends you lose. That's the way it is. By just unfortunately, we outlive the animals by so far. Sometimes the human lifespan is so much longer than that of some of these animals, that you lose them. You lose them, and it never stops happening. and it just constantly takes the wind out of you. And there's no one who can empathize, who doesn't do this every day. There's no one who can empathize with you. And so you feel alone and isolated and stuff. So it's hard. It's hard. I think people should just know what they're getting into. And yet I'm not sure they can know what they're getting into without getting into it,
Right. Right. Could you give me one word to describe kind of how you felt before you opened the sanctuary, and then one word to describe how you feel now that you have this sanctuary?
All right. I think it's the same word. Afraid. I was afraid before I started this sanctuary that it would be too much. And now that I'm here, I'm afraid every day. We have all the animals here. It's, I'm always afraid. I really am. I'm always afraid of something. It's, I think that's the word for both.
All right. What are your future plans?
Whew. Well, I think the biggest plans, we're here. We have a big piece of land. So, there's always more improvements and stuff we can do on the land. And then there's, hopefully finding more of the right people to be involved with us. The plans are, honestly, to win, to have everyone learn what I learned, and to stop seeing these animals as commodities and things, and then my place be a museum, with the idea of, do you believe we needed places like this because we didn't know not to treat animals the right way? And that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal, is to be done from this, for the world to not ever have to need a sanctuary for someone, because they're no longer being seen that way anymore.
All right, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to help out Mike and the animals at Skylands Animal Sanctuary and Rescue, you can make a donation by going to skylandssanctuary.org. There's also a link there to become a member and a volunteer. Hope you were inspired by Mike's story. And remember, it's never too late to plant your seed.